Manchester's indie rock and roll station, XS Manchester. The XS Manchester long player, an iconic album in full with Jim Salveson. XS Manchester.
You all right, how you doing? I'm Jim, and this is the XS long player. Classic albums talked through with the people who made them. If you've been enjoying this podcast series so far, please do make sure you've subscribed, because there's loads more episodes to come, as well as a load of episodes in the bank, actually, that you can listen to. Loads of classic albums talked about, probably your favourites already done or still to come. So make sure you've subscribed or followed, and please take the time to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts to tell me what you make of these shows, which ones were your favourites, and who you'd like me to talk to in the future. But today, I am talking to Billy from the Subways about their debut album Young for Eternity, which has just ticked over 25 years on the planet. As you'll hear me talking about with Billy, they celebrated those 25 years with a whole load of gigs throughout the UK, playing the album in full, and now their attention turns to brand new music with a new album coming next year. But this conversation is all about the very start of the band, how they got their break, how they recorded music, and the making of this classic album. One of the things I hope comes across in this chat I had with Billy is how enthusiastic he is as an individual. And not only does that come across in the music from the band, I think it comes across in every time he talks about the music he makes as well. You can almost see the fire in his belly lighting up as he discusses the band and the music they're making and what they're going to do in the future as well. If you want to listen to Subway's Young for Eternity before you get stuck into this conversation, please do hit pause. I put a link to the album in Spotify in the podcast description, as well as any other links you might need from this episode, So go and check it out there, whilst I get stuck into my conversation with Billy Lunn from the Subways, talking about their debut album, Young for Eternity. How you doing, Billy?
I'm good. How are you, Jim?
Yeah, really good. Delighted to talk to you about this album, which I can't quite believe is 16 years old. I'm sure it's probably more of a shock to you that it's 16 years old. We're going to go right the way. We're going to go right the way back to 2005, the start of this conversation. Maybe even a little bit earlier, actually, because the album came out in 2005. I want to go and start off a few years before that, the kind of genesis of the band, when you got together with the guys and you were playing these Nirvana and Green Day songs. Is that where you saw yourselves when you started out? Did you think we're going to be the Welwyn Garden version of Green Day?
I don't know. Actually, I guess so, because we initially called ourselves Platypus after the song Platypus I Hate You off the Nimrod record.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we changed it to the Subways when we started playing in London. But I think really we just wanted to be in a band. I mean, initially we started the band because we wanted to be in the rock contest at the Harlow Square, which a lot of our school friends were joining. They were like forming bands and joining this competition. And they were like, oh yeah, you know, you just like get on stage and there are actually like people there watching you and you get to play music. And I'm like,
you're going to have to explain to me what the Harlow Square is.
Yeah, of course. Well, the Harlow Square was, unfortunately, it's a pile of rubble now, much to my heartbreak, my continual heartbreak. But it used to be the creative hub of Hearts and Essex. And so many legends have passed through there. Oasis, Blur, probably even Green Day. I wouldn't put it past them. As well as that, they function as a community centre. So a few friends and I would turn up and watch these bands. And then, you know, a short time afterwards, we found ourselves playing on stage, you know, playing our own songs mixed in with a bunch of, like you said, Nirvana and Green Day covers. But it wasn't just like a venue. It was like a place where you went to socialize, where you could hang out, where you could eat your lunch on a lunch break, or you could go for a drink, or you could go for a dance, you know, because they had R&B nights and they had hardcore nights, they had garage nights and all that kind of stuff. So we basically formed all our friendship groups around the Harlow Square.
Right.
So when we were in school, we were like, we want to play at the square. We want to play on that stage. So we formed the band and we started playing Nirvana and Green Day songs. Well, it was me and Josh at school initially, and I was dating Charlotte at the time. And I was like, why don't you, when you finish school, come over to our school, we'll book a room and we'll just play together and you know, we'll work something out. And that happened like almost every day. You know, we were doing it almost every day after school. And for the last couple of years at school, I was just obsessed with playing music, with playing rock and roll and being in a rock and roll band. So yeah, we formed the band. We went on stage and played this gig at the rock contest at the Harlow Square, and it was awful. Like, I can remember being really traumatized by it, like how bad it was. I was like, oh, I can't believe it's like this, you know. But I came off stage, and rather than saying I'm never going to do that again, I was like, we're going to do that again, but we're going to be good next time, you know.
Yeah.
And so we refined our set list. We learned how to tune our guitars, and we learned how to sound check and all that sort of stuff. But the Square was really fundamental in sort of teaching us how to do that as well. That's basically the Harlow Square and the formation of the band and how we came to be.
I mean, those early days were interesting as well. You've got your Harlow Square fans, obviously the people watching you there, but your appeal, I guess, emanated out from that because of quite an unusual approach you had to recording and releasing music. You were recording your own stuff, albeit on a fairly basic setup, and that was quite unusual in 2005. It's kind of the norm now, I guess. And then you were just throwing these demos up on your website, these kind of rough and ready things. Do you think that helped you grow? And also, did that help you make kind of informed decisions about what music worked? Because you could gauge reaction from this kind of this stuff that was very much at the early stages of its development.
Definitely. When we started the band, I was like, you know, I think I used to be in a lot of forums. Like, I was a big fan of the Von Bondis and a big fan of the Vines, and I'd sort of go onto their forums and comment and just be like, oh, I love their new song and I can't wait for them to come to London and that kind of stuff. So I knew how important forums were to sort of building a fan base and, you know, getting people coming to shows, but at the same time, like, just building a really lovely community of people who love the band, and as well as liking our band, like, shared the music that they were also into, like other bands that they would let us know we should check out or go and see, or maybe ask for a support slot or something. So yeah, we started out there, and I would record in my parents' council house. I would have like the tiny little 8-track on the kitchen table. It's this tiny little box kitchen, and we'd sort of feed the leads through into the living room. And when my mum and dad were out at work during the day, we'd record like drums and then bass and guitars. And yeah, like you say, pretty much everyone's doing that at the moment, like home recording. But it's kind of strange because the studio I have now is in a space which once upon a time was much too expensive for us to use. The reason why I started home recording in the first place was because we looked at this place called Farm Factory, and we didn't have £200 to spend on 3 days of recording and not knowing whether it was going to be to our liking or not. So I said, rather than spending £200 on just like one set of 3 songs, why don't we spend £200 on a piece of recording equipment, some semi-good microphones and some leads. We'll teach ourselves how to do it. Well, I'll teach myself how to do it. So yeah, I ended up recording a lot of the stuff. I mean, I was writing 3 or 4 songs a week, and we were throwing 3 or 4 songs a week away. Just a lot of creativity, but a lot of throwing away going on. So it was a good idea just to start recording everything that we wrote, so we weren't throwing away ideas that we thought at a later stage were really good, and then, you know, all of a sudden we'd forgotten what the song was. So we just accumulate all these demos. Eventually we came up with like 7 demos, each of 3 or 4 songs on, self-produced, self-burnt. You know, we'd burn the CDs en masse and write the subways and the track titles on, and we got our mum and dad involved. Even some of the demos that a lot of fans have got now, they have my mum's handwriting on them. I'm like, oh, that's my mum's handwriting. And yeah, so we'd upload them onto our website, and it was good because we got to gauge what people thought of them. But at the same time, it definitely taught me that if you don't think something's ready, don't put it up, don't release it. Because I remember getting in a conversation with someone on the forum, and they're like, I really don't like this. And I was like, well, actually, it's not fully formed. And they're like, well, why have you put it up then? And I'm like, that's a really good point. Why did I, you know, at that time, it was like content over quality. It's just like, let's try and get as many songs as we can recorded and uploaded, and so everyone knows all the words. But at the same time, we're kind of uploading these half thought through ideas. So that's when I started to really refine how we were writing, how we were recording, and how we were uploading our stuff onto the internet. And that's a real skill, you know. That's not something that I think occurs to you initially when you're in kind of the whirlwind of creativity and excitement of a new song and all that sort of stuff. But it's something I very much take into account when I'm producing and when I'm writing. Right. You know, I don't send Charlotte any ideas until I'm like, actually, this is a really good idea, because it's going to be a waste of her time formulating bass lines and backing vocals to a song that's probably going to come to nothing. And, you know, it taught me as well that when we were sending our demos out to agents and promoters in London, and that's where we really started to grow the band, is that we weren't just playing at the Harlow Square anymore. We weren't just playing in Welwyn Garden City. We were like, no, we need to go to places where we don't know people, where our friends can't necessarily get there. So we threw ourselves into playing venues in London. So I remember we played the Buffalo Bar in Highbury, Islington, which was underneath the famous Cock Pub, which is immediately to the right as you come out of Highbury and Islington Station, but it's no longer there. It was one of the best venues in London, absolutely sublime. You'd sort of go down these rickety stairs, and then all of a sudden this just like dark red, maroon colored room with all this weird lighting in this tiny stage in the corner. But some of the best gigs we've ever played or watched there have taken place at the Buffalo Bar in Highbury, Islington. But we played our first ever gig there. And I remember the sound engineer running up to the stage and shaking the microphone and going, please let me be your manager. And he's still our manager now. So our first London gig, we met our manager. But yeah, you know, it was a big learning curve, and it definitely shaped the way that we ended up kind of refining our process. But at the same time, that initial urgency to write and let people know about what we're doing, like via a forum or by the website.
The excitement of wanting to get it out there, I guess, it's like how you have to balance that.
Yeah, well, it's tough because we are a group of really enthusiastic people, and it's not cool. You know, we love what we do. We love being in this band. We love writing songs. We definitely love being on stage. I mean, we live for getting on stage and rocking out and sweating and having a great time and making people smile. And that's not necessarily seen as cool by many, but it's something that we actually think is quite cool. And that's always stayed with us, you know, the enthusiasm to create, the enthusiasm to get on that stage, the enthusiasm to still talk to our fans. You know, we regularly use Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or whatever new platform there happens to be next week as a way to kind of communicate with our fans and get to know them, because they're a very important part of our journey, we think.
I think the enthusiasm of you in the subways is one of the most endearing elements, I guess. One of the reasons that I think you are a fantastic band, it's that energy that you bring to the occasion. And talking about those demos, though, going back to your self-recording, it was one of those that I guess arguably kind of changed it all when you were invited to play the unsigned band stage in Glastonbury, which was back in 2004, so a year before the album was released. I'm sure all bands will be familiar with that feeling of sending off a demo tape or a CD or an MP3 into a competition like that. And unfortunately, not many bands will be familiar with getting that call, telling them that they're going to be stepping onto the stage at Glastonbury. Do you remember that phone call and what that felt like?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I even remember why we entered in the first place. You know, I was recording one of my mates' bands, and we were sat in the kitchen, and we'd finished recording, and I was kind of finishing up mixing, and I was about to burn the original CD from which I'd burn all the other copies. And I was like, oh, where do you plan on sending this CD, guys? Because, you know, we've got this big book full of London promoters that you can sort of steal some names off if you like. And they said, yeah, that'd be amazing. But primarily we want to send it off to Michael Levis. He's running this Glastonbury competition. And we think that, you know, these songs that we've recorded have got a good shot. And I thought, yeah, that's true. But in the back of my head, I was like, we've kind of got a bunch of good songs as well. Why don't we send off a demo? And we were just about to send off a batch of 30 CDs to some London promoters for another huge run of gigs over a couple of months, because we sort of did these runs of gigs over 2 or 3 months, and then we'd stop and do a bunch of more writing, bunch more recording, and then send them out, and then do another 2 or 3 months of playing gigs around when we were working or when Charlotte was studying. And so I, you know, as I was collecting these 30 CDs I was about to send off to London, I piled onto this one CD 3 of our best songs, which included 1am. I can't actually remember the other 2 songs. I think Rock and Roll Queen might even have been on it. Yeah, so it just went off with all the other CDs I'd sent off. And a couple of weeks later, I'd totally forgotten about it, but I got this phone call from a number I didn't know on my mobile. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Hello. And it was a guy called Wes White. And it was like, I've just got your CD through the post. I put it on the stereo and it's absolutely amazing. I'm with the Glastonbury Unsigned competition, and we really like for you to come and play Michael Levis's Working Men's Club in Pilton. And I was like, oh, ace, great, another gig, fantastic. So, you know, in my head, it was just another gig.
Yeah.
But we sort of moseyed on and eventually played the 2 or 3 songs that they allowed us to play for the competition. About halfway through the 3rd song, we just decided to trash everything. And as we're packing everything up, Michael Levis himself walks over to me and goes, you got the gig. Well done.
Wow.
And then later on, because everything has to be official, he called us up and was like, yep, I can officially offer you the other stage at Glastonbury Festival 2004. And we just like, because up to that point, we're like, yeah, he'd said he was giving it to us, but we don't quite know if he was hammered or not. But no, he definitely gave us the gig, and we kind of lost our minds a little bit. And we were like, yeah, we're going to play Glastonbury Festival. But I mean, even by that time, we were playing sellout shows in London because we started to build this really kind of fervent, passionate, loving community. You know, people would travel from all over the country to come see us play at the Bull and Gate in Kentish Town or wherever. So it was kind of just like, we get to, you know, we're not playing in London this time, we're playing in the West Country. So let's go. Excellent. Everyone in a van.
It was already starting to happen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the album itself. Let's get stuck into this. So I noticed when I was doing a bit of research on Young for Eternity that Ian Brodie was the producer, as in Ian Brodie from the Lightning Seeds. I was surprised by that. I don't think I'd known that previously. Was that your call? Was that the label's call? Because for me, Ian Brodie as a artist, and I don't know much about his work as a producer, if I'm honest, but it doesn't scream to me punk rock or garage rock.
Yeah, it's we were talking with a bunch of producers, and I've always been a huge fan of Supergrass, so we were talking to a bunch of people who were involved with Supergrass's production and engineering and mixing. And we met up with them, and they were great. They were absolutely great. But our A&R guy, Neil Ridley, he got hold of Ian Brodie, and he was like, look, Ian really wants to do this album. Just give him a shot. Have some dinner with him and see how you like him. And we all just like sat down at this kind of this pizza place in Welwyn Garden City, and we just got on famously. It was just great. And we were like, yeah, you know, we can. I can see us lasting the entirety of the recording process with this guy, you know, because Josh and I were really passionate about ideas, and sometimes we would come to blows on certain creative ideas of the way, you know, a mix should be. And Charlotte was pretty easy about everything, but we thought that Ian would deal with our situation really, really well. And we definitely knew that things were going to work out after we recorded our first 2 tracks in 2004. I think it was in November or December 2004. We recorded Oh Yeah and Rock and Roll Queen. And as soon as we got the mixes through from that, we were like, oh yeah, this is the guy. this is the one who's going to do our record. Because he was just like blistering, and he got it. And also, like, you know, Ian's a pop songwriter, but I could see that he could see that I was deep down like a pop songwriter. I grew up on Motown music. Like, you know, the first song I fell in love with, and the song that made me fall in love with not just music but also falling in love with the idea of love, was Smokey Robinson's The Tracks of My Tears. And ever since then I've been in love with Motown music, like the conciseness of a pop track, you know, the way a structure can completely shift the way you think about a pop song. So I got into, you know, Carpenters, ABBA, all that sort of stuff, as well as Mark Bolan, Dave Bowie, and all the punk bands we started listening to when we were hanging out at the Square, and all the metal bands and rock bands there. So I think Ian saw in us like, yeah, we are a really passionate, really fast moving, frenetic 3-piece when we're on stage. But at the same time, there's something there with the songs that I think you can hear in songs like Mary, where there's a melody, there's like a love song happening there, and it's not just about us bashing something out or sort of bashing out a cool riff. Like there's something kind of very pop there. So he wanted to meet those 2 elements, the rock and the pop, nicely in the middle. And I'm a huge fan of Nevermind by Nirvana, and I remember Kurt Cobain saying in an interview about that record, you know, there are so many pop elements to this album that we really wanted to ramp up the rock element of it. And I was like, that's exactly how I feel about my music. A lot of it is written on the acoustic guitar, and then it's taken to the band and we build the song from there. Like, I don't ever start with us just going, right, here are the chords, let's all pile in. It's actually quite meticulous, even though it sounds simple. So I think Ian got that, and I could see that in his own songwriting, in his own production, with the stuff that he did with the choral and Zootons, but also it's something that he just kind of saw in us at the same time.
It's interesting you mentioned the creative tensions between yourself and Josh particularly, because you've always seemed like a really super knit group, band of brothers, even girlfriends / ex-girlfriends in there as well.
Yeah.
Did that make the experience, the fact you were mates that had grown up and you had these relationships, did that make the recording experience more intense? Is it more difficult to kind of navigate your way through that, I imagine, very stressful process when you have those relationships, or does that make it easier?
A bit of both. I mean, the dynamic is obviously really different because we're all so intensely related. You know, Charlotte and I at the time were going out and, you know, we really wanted to get married. And Josh and I had spent our entire life growing up together. And we, as well as being like best friends, we were also like biggest enemies, as you are with your siblings. So when we formed the band, it was kind of like, this is either going to see us through quite nicely or it's going to tear us apart very, very quickly. And there were moments when, you know, I'm a control freak, you know, I'm the songwriter in the band, I'm the singer in the band, and I would record and mix our demos. So I had a lot of creative control over the process. That was a lot of responsibility as well as being, you know, something that I treasured. So there were times when Josh would say something, and because of the nature of our relationship as siblings, I would take that in the worst possible way of like, you're just trying to push my buttons, aren't you? No, I'm just saying this because I think the song will benefit. No, you're saying this because you want to push my buttons because you're the younger brother, you know, I'm the older brother, and you want to try and exercise some power over me or something. Obviously I didn't articulate it in that way, but yeah, you know, there were tensions. And I think because like, this is a really important thing, making a record, you know, there's a lot at stake here. And also we love these songs and we want to go out and tour these songs, and that's really, really important to us. So, you know, if you have like a grievance, it has to be aired, and it has to be fair. And sometimes it wasn't always fair, but at the same time, because we were so closely related, because we're so connected and tuned in, and you know, that's something that really helps us when we play live. We can read each other so easily. There's kind of an electricity there that you can't really account for if it's just a friend with whom you formed a band. You know, there was this kind of unspoken weird telekinetic thing happening between the three of us whenever something would happen on stage. And that's kind of what got us through recording the album, when there were heightened tensions, when we did kind of doubt ourselves or the song or the direction it was going in. Sometimes we would be at odds with Ian, and it was the first time we'd ever really experienced that creatively, because you know, it was just us recording our demos, and our manager was always just like, I believe in you, you do what you want to do. And so, you know, it's the first time we'd ever encountered someone who was like, this song isn't working this way, you need to do it this way. And that was only something that I really learned from after the fact, once you're outside the chaos of the creative endeavor of making a record, you know, because you're so keyed in to getting the record done and making sure it's the best it can possibly be. And once you're listening through to the mixes, you're like, yeah, Ian was so right.
But that's the job of a producer, isn't it? To challenge you and to push you and to make you question what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I realize that. And I definitely realized that by the time we went into the studio in LA to record with Butch Vig, not just because we were in LA or working with Butch Vig, but just because I'd learned from that process with Ian. But also I was a little bit older, you know, by the time we recorded All or Nothing, I was 22, 23, and I was only 18 or 19 when we recorded Young Fraternity. So, you know, a lot of my friends were going to university and partying and, you know, forming sort of social connections there and making the mistakes at university. And I was like thrust into a recording studio, and all my mistakes would be there on tape for everyone to hear. So it was kind of like a big responsibility meets an immense amount of naivety. But it's something I listen back to on the album, and I'm like, do you know what? That's really important that it's there, because it speaks for itself. It speaks of us at a certain time. This record is like a true raw representation of who we were then and who we kind of still are now.
I'm going to ask you to pick a couple of moments off this album in a minute, Billy. So they can be tracks you love or tracks that mean a lot or tracks that spark memories. Completely up to you, but I'm going to get you to pick a couple. But before we do that, I want to read you a review that I found from The NME when the album first came out.
Yes.
And it says, you might even remember this, I don't know. The review goes, it often sounds like...
Can I just...
Sorry, go on.
Does it mention the word schizophrenic?
No, I don't think so.
The quotation. Okay, because that's something I do remember from that review. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, we'll come back to that in a minute then.
Okay.
So it goes, it often sounds more like AC/DC than anyone could have wanted, but at other times, like on Somewhere, everything goes a bit Jesus and Mary Chain by the way of Foo Fighters, which is highly unexpected, but nonetheless pretty good. It's the type of dark, summery rock hit that hints at what's to come from the future, whilst the rest of the album, which is more excitable and adolescent, shows the band's tender age and their obvious lust for life and for each other. That's some pretty positive words from The NME back in the noughties, because they didn't do positivity lightly. They were kind of a bit snipey and a bit negative in their reviews at the time.
Yeah.
Did you pay attention to that kind of thing when it came out?
Definitely. I mean, I can remember going to college. I was taken a BTEC in creative arts, and after I left school, I just wanted to make noise and paint and draw and dance and act. So I went and did that for 2 years, and every single week on the Wednesday morning before I'd go to class, I'd pick up the NME, and that was a big thing for me. So when they said something like that in the NME, obviously it's like, oh my God, it's really important, because I remember opening the NME and reading, I would go straight for the terrible reviews because they were always hilarious. Like the NME never held back. Like
until it's your album, I guess, so it's less funny.
Oh, totally. And I was like, phew, we're not one of those. Okay, great. But they would, even with the good reviews, they'd find something, some little dig, some little twist that they would make. And I think that's what made it such like intriguing, sensational stuff to read. And I just loved it. But yeah, when they said stuff like that, I was like, yes, you get it. You absolutely get it. You get us. And that's so validating to hear, especially with the AC/DC stuff, because AC/DC were the first band Josh and I ever went to see live. Like, my dad took us to see AC/DC at Wembley Arena. And after that gig, my ears never stopped ringing. And that was a constant reminder of that gig, that moment, the importance of that moment, the power of that moment. And because of that, to this day, my main guitar is a Gibson SG because of Angus Young. Because I remember seeing Angus Young on stage and I was like, that is what I want to do when I grow up. And I was like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old. And I already knew that this is what I wanted to do. So when they kind of invoke AC/DC, but then Jesus and Mary Chain, there are a lot of psychedelic moments on this record that I really wanted to emphasize and have in there. And I had to fight for those moments, because we were writing a lot of pop songs, a lot of pop rock songs, a lot of garage rock songs. And I was like, no, these songs are kind of, I was already leaning into the second record when we were starting the first record. Like, right. We had this song list ready for the first record. And I was constantly talking about making the second record whilst we were making Young for Eternity, because I already knew the journey I wanted to make after this album. And that's just how quick and enthusiastic my thinking was. I was just like, yes, so we've made this, but now we need to make this, or I want to make this, or we should make this, and for this reason. So when someone like a journalist at the NME can see that and can kind of gauge that intent, it not only means, that's amazing, they've been really kind in that they've stepped back and gone, we can see what they're trying to do here, but also that they've given you the time. Because it's journalism at that time, they didn't give you much time. You were either a hit or you weren't a hit. And I think it was just great to read that they could see potential, especially given our age. But yeah, I remember from that review, the word schizophrenic appearing. And I really took issue with that word, because I was like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that we don't have a niche? And I think the word niche was also mentioned. And I was like, I kind of took issue with that, because I was like, I don't want a niche. I'm a songwriter. I'm not here to fulfill people's expectations. Yeah, I'm going to write pop rock songs, but I'm going to write them because I love playing them and I love hearing them. And at the same time, if I'm going to make a psychedelic pop number, or like a very heavy kind of Deftonesy riff, then I'm going to do that. But at the same time, they kind of, in the NME review, made allowances for that. And it's really funny now, because a lot of albums are praised for being kind of schizophrenic, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I mean, by the word schizophrenic, I think what they're meaning is that it's not parochially of a specific genre, that maybe there's a pop song, then there's a rock song, then there's a folk song. And now that's seen as something that artists kind of should be able to have, like the ability to hotfoot it from one thing to another, because it shows a range, but also like a diversity of thinking. And that's really what I wanted to go for with this record. And I still can't believe when I listened to it that I had the gall to make this kind of album, to go, do you know what? Everyone's really expecting us to pile in with Rock and Roll Queen. Let's start that album with an acoustic guitar. Let's freak them out a little bit. Because we never played acoustic guitar when we were playing rock gigs in London. And so I was like, this is how the songs start. I write them on acoustic guitar. So let's start the album with an acoustic guitar. Let's show them a part of the subways that no one's really going to expect, but actually something that's a big part of us.
Pick a couple of tunes off this album that you can remember recording or remember writing, or that sparks special memories for you, Billy. What would you like to go for?
So I can remember waking up in the morning and gearing up for recording the song I Want to Hear What You've Got to Say. And I kind of had an idea that I wanted it to be the first track on the record, because as I say, I knew that I wanted to record the intro on an acoustic guitar. And this song initially began as the B-side for our very first single, 1am, which was released on Transgressive Records in 2004. When we re-recorded it with Ian in Liverpool for Young for Eternity, I really wanted to add a few more elements that were heavily influenced by virtue of our merely being in Liverpool. Because, you know, being in the city of Liverpool, having not really traveled all that much as a, you know, around the UK anyway, as a kid, being in Liverpool, the birthplace of some of our favorite bands, and walking down those streets and going to those bars and all that kind of stuff, it really fed the feeling with which we went into the studio every single morning. So the stab guitars followed me listening to the Lars on a constant loop whilst I was staying in the apartment in Liverpool. Right. I also came up with the first line of the intro, "Another day is here and I'm still alive," after I was waking up in the morning. And the original version on the Transgressive Records single for 1am didn't have that line. I woke up and I was like, this line has to start the album. It has to start this song, but it also has to start this album. And I can just remember turning to Charlotte, having just woken up and gone, I think I'm going to start the album with this line. Tell me if you like it. Another day is here and I am still alive. And she was like, I love it. I love it. And every time we're on stage and I start the guitar part for I Want to Hear What You've Got to Say, people just scream at me the line, another day is here and I am still alive, like with so much passion that I'm so glad that that line came to me when I was waking up in the morning. And I walked into the studio and I was like, Ian, I've got the first line of this song. It's not what I've originally written down for you. It's something else. And that was a really big moment for me and a really big moment for the record, I think.
Pick me another one. Go on, go for another track.
Okay. Right. Mary, which is my favorite song on the album. So I wrote this, as I wrote all of this album, when I was working as a linen porter in a hotel a few towns away from where I grew up. I used to wake up really early in the morning, catch the bus, listen to tunes on the way there, you know, do my job. And the job itself consisted of collecting all the dirty linen from all the hotel rooms, packing it up, sending it off to be washed, then distributing the clean linen throughout all the rooms across the hotel. So it was basically just me walking around on my own, singing these ideas that I was coming up with in my head, as well as all these songs that I was falling in love with at the time. I really loved it, even though it was like kind of crappy, but there was coffee. I could have a smoke when I wanted to. I used to smoke back then. It gave me loads of times to think about the song ideas I was coming up with on a day-to-day basis. So one day I got on the bus home from this job. I got through the door and I saw my mum on the sofa looking really dejected and sad. So I thought, okay, before she notices I'm back, I'm going to pop upstairs. I'm going to finish this idea that I've got on the guitar and I'm going to take it downstairs to her and I'm going to play it and I'm going to try and cheer her up. And I finished it off in one go, came downstairs, played it for mum, and it cheered her up, and it ended up being the song Mary. And I still listen to it now and I think, God, how did I come up with that? You know, because I think it's kind of this weird fusion of Oasis, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, the Ramones, Nirvana. They've all got some part to play in this song. They've all been cobbled together. And there's a bit of Blondie in there as well. And I love my influences, and I'm unafraid to show my influences on my songwriting. So yeah, it's a really jolly little number, a nice little triplet. And it always seems to make people smile when we play it live.
You mentioned it's one of your favorite songs on the album. I don't think it was a single, if I remember rightly. I think they were Rock and Roll Queen, Oh Yeah, No Goodbyes, With You. Were they the 4 singles?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you feel, as it's your favorite song, is it like you want to push it to the front, you want it to be a single, or does the logic in your brain take over and go, no, look, Rock and Roll Queen is the one, that's the one that's going to fly for us?
Yeah, when it comes to singles, picking singles, it's something that is it's a reconcile of all these various factors that are constantly swirling around you. Because, you know, even now, as I'm sort of finishing up the mastering process of our 5th album, I'm having calls from a manager going, right, the plan is this song is first single, this song is second single, and then I'll get a WhatsApp message from someone at the record label going, your manager said this, but I really love this song, let's push for this song. And then I've got band members going, Billy, this is a great song, don't let them not have this as a single. And it's a weird thing, because I've never been a business-minded person. The idea of markets, speculation, accumulation, financial gain, all that stuff is just like gross, and I want to shake it off, and I wish I didn't have to deal with it. We all have to deal with it, but I wish I didn't have to deal with it. All I want to do is wake up, write, play music, make people smile, have a great time. When it comes to picking something that is going to reconcile all these various requests from a number of directions, it's really just about, okay, what are they looking for from this album? In a way, I've already fulfilled what I want from this album by writing it, recording it, having it mixed, having it mastered, and just having it released. So if someone thinks it will be a good idea to have this single rather than my favorite single released as a song, I can kind of deal with that, because I know that it's taken into account all these various things of which I have no interest or not even like the brain, the way of thinking to kind of come to terms with that. So the fact that Mary was never released as a single is something I can totally live with. And it's always been a fondness of mine to love album tracks. Some of my favorite tracks by some of my favorite bands are ones that weren't picked for singles. They're often ones that a lot of people will be like, I can't believe you like this song. Like it's one of the worst songs in the album. I'm like, yeah, a part of me likes it because of that, because
like
it's the odd one out. Yeah, exactly. I like siding with the underdog. I remember we were touring America, and our project manager over there, Brent, who worked for Warner's, he loved What's the Story, Morning Glory. And I obviously grew up with that record, and I love it too. But he was like, every time it got to Hey Now, I'd be like, oh, this song's so crap. I hate this song. I mean, I love this song. This song's so great. It's so lush. And the solo, I think the solo is the best part, one of the best parts of the album. I don't think you can really call anything on that album the best part. It's all fucking excellent. So, when a song like Mary, which is my favorite song, and it has the biggest emotional attachment for me, given like the origins of the song and all that, I still get to play it live. I still get to sing it. It's still on the album, and I get overall say of what actually appears on the album anyway, because it's because I'm a control freak. So if a record label's like, it's not going to be a single, I'm like, well, what I like doesn't necessarily conform with what the demands are in the quote unquote market, of which I have no interest. So yeah.
You recently went back to this album with a tour, playing it in full. The tour's finished now. I think we're talking in end of October 2021. Is it all wrapped up now, the Young for Eternity tour?
It is, thank heavens. we started it in March 2020.
Oh, wow.
And we played 3 shows. Our last show of 2020 was at Manchester Academy. I was just there the other day, actually, doing an interview for a friend who's got this fantastic documentary coming out. But yeah, I'd sort of walked in and I was like, the last time I was in here, everyone was in a panic. Everyone was like, we are going home. There's a pandemic. Half the crowd haven't turned up because they're so scared. Should we be going on stage? We're all, we don't know what's happening. And the day after was when the pandemic was officially declared and a lockdown was incoming. So we're kind of glad that we decided that was the last show and we were packing up and going home. But so in the intervening time, we finished our 5th album. Josh, my brother, left the band to pursue his own musical career. We've got a new drummer called Camille Phillips, who's absolutely amazing. We saw her playing with the all-female tribute band, the Ramonas, and they actually write their own material as well. So they do tours of like half shows of Ramones songs and half shows of Ramonas songs. Saw her playing with just like, look, we think you're amazing. Do you want to join our band? She was like, yes, great. So we played our first shows with Camille, finishing off the final dates for the Young for Eternity tour. And it was just utterly life affirming. It's also just, I think it was really great having that whole year of going on stage and playing Young for Eternity in full. And then kind of going, this is cool. It's weird, but it's kind of cool. Having a year's break, coming back and just going, no, this is the best thing in the entire world. Just this whole new perspective over it of just being so thankful to be on stage, so thankful to be playing to real people, but also like just being so thankful of this record that did so much for us. Playing these songs that over the years people have messaged us and gone, your song, like say With You, we walked down, my partner and I walked down the aisle to that song, or we had our first dance to that song at our wedding. Yeah, even over the last year, I've had this horrible situation of a fan contacting me saying that his dad was dying. He had a week left to live. He was dying of cancer. Could I send one of the songs performed acoustically, send a video of me playing it for him over his last week? And it was a really lovely thing to do, to be able to speak to someone down a camera and devote something to them in that way. But at the same time, it was kind of a huge reminder of the loss. And I think we've all experienced, to an extent, a certain amount of loss over this last 18 months. So when we got back on stage and we were playing this album, we were just so thankful for everything that we still have. And I think playing this record was all the way through, rather than being a challenge like it was for those first 3 shows in 2020, it became kind of a spiritual experience. I don't know if we'll ever really forget it, or we'll ever really forget the responses to the songs. Even the songs that we never thought would get such a wild response, like She Sun, which is such a languid, Neil Young-esque song, which again, I don't think many people expected. But when we play it live, there's kind of this energy to the air, which is just a beautiful thing to relish. I think when we first played it in 2020, that we were more nervous to be playing it because we'd never really played it on stage before. But now, when we played it in 2021, we were just like savoring every second, just enjoying those moments on stage with each other.
When you went back to these songs and played them live and stepped on stage 16 years after they were first released and you played them for the first time, did you recognize the people who wrote those songs in the first place?
Yeah, and I think that's what I find so unsettling about it is, so much time has passed. And I think when you're younger, and especially when I was writing this album, all of us experience during a certain period of our youth this feeling of immortality, like we're indestructible, nothing's going to take us down, we're going to live forever, never going to get old, and that's kind of why I chose Young Fraternity as the title track for this album, because it was like, this is how we feel right now. We feel indestructible. We feel like we're rampaging through everything. And I think now, as I, go on stage and I play this song all the way through, as in my mid-30s, especially when I sing songs like These Teenage Lips, They Speak Too Fast, in songs like Oh Yeah, I'm suddenly reminded of my actual age, but not just like who I was then and who I am now, but that space and time and all the events in between and what we've experienced thus far. And what I find really weird is not that I don't recognize that kid who wrote all those songs, it's that I recognize too familiarly that kid who wrote all those songs. That there's still a huge part of that kid that's still there with me, that kind of untamable passion and wonder for the world, and who keeps surging on and making music. Even though I'm sort of officially like mature, I'm still like, no, this stuff matters, man. Like music matters, art matters. And I still remember like how precocious I was when I was 16 and I pledged to myself that I was never going to work in an office. I was never going to put on a suit. I was going to do something different. And that's not to disparage anyone who works in an office. Good for you for doing that. You have something that I don't have, but I knew I couldn't do it and that I had to do something else. And, I was always going to, for better or worse, be a musician, whether it's like busking on the street corner or playing on a stage in front of 50,000 people. So yeah, I'm still very much that kid. He's still there. He still says stupid stuff, he still makes rash decisions, but he's also still a precocious little turd, who makes good choices. And, that's something I recognize when I listen back to the album.
That's the perfect thought to finish our conversation on, I think, Billy. Excited to hear the new music, which I assume will be out kind of summer next year. Is that kind of when the album we're going to get to do it?
Yeah. The next single might even be as early as January or February. So, but the album, summer, I reckon. Yeah.
Nice. Billy, love to talk to you about a truly classic album, Young Fraternity. Really appreciate your time.
Well, you're a legend, Jim. Thank you so much.
The XS Manchester Long Player, an iconic album in full with Jim Salveson. XS Manchester.
Another classic album boxed off on the XS Long Player. If you want to suggest a classic album that I should cover on this podcast, then please get in touch. You can do so by leaving a review of the podcast on Apple or whatever podcasting app you use. Or you can find me on Twitter at Mr_Jimbob. Find me there, send me a message, let me know what album I should be covering and who I should talk to. And I will deliver you very soon another classic album on the XS Long Player.
Manchester's indie rock and roll station, XS Manchester.